Today, we're diving into how one of the world's most disaster-prone nations is trying to get ahead of Mother Nature. We're going to look at India's huge shift, moving away from just cleaning up after a disaster to actually trying to stop it, or at least soften the blow before it even happens.
Okay, let's just start with one number, because it's pretty staggering. 68%. That is how much of India's farmable land is vulnerable to drought. For a country that relies so heavily on agriculture, well, that number is a constant, massive threat. But here's the thing. As serious as drought is, it's really just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. India's full vulnerability is way more complex, and it's literally written into the country's landscape. So that's where we have to start, with the geography itself. To really get a handle on the scale of this challenge, you have to understand the land. India's unique spot on the globe basically creates a perfect storm for a whole menu of natural disasters. I mean, just think about all the different fronts here. India sits in what's called a tropical heat surplus zone, which is basically a natural engine for extreme weather. Then you've got this massive coastline, constantly exposed to cyclones. From the north, the towering Himalayas are seismically active, a constant threat of earthquakes. And if that's not enough, there are these huge river plains that are just prone to flooding. It's like the country is being squeezed by its own geography.
And this isn't just about rocks and rivers, right? We're talking about people. Roughly 1/3 of India's entire population lives along that vulnerable coast. That puts tens of millions of people directly in harm's way every single time a cyclone starts brewing. So you take this incredibly high-risk geography, you add a massive population, and what do you get? You get a catalog of calamities that's honestly breathtaking in its sheer variety and scale. Seriously, this isn't a country dealing with just one or two things. It's fighting on all fronts. You've got earthquakes, cyclones, floods, droughts, landslides, brutal heat waves, and even these intense things called cloudbursts. Okay, let's actually pause on that last one for a second, because a cloudburst is particularly nasty. This is not just heavy rain. It is an almost unbelievable amount of water falling in a really small area over a very short time. It's the kind of thing that can trigger deadly flash floods and landslides with almost zero warning. For decades, the approach to all of this was pretty much reactive. Wait for the disaster, then clean up the mess. But a series of really devastating events forced a huge turning point. This is where the story shifts, from a nation just reacting to one that's trying to get ready. The big change here is all about timing. The old way of thinking was purely reactive. What do we do after the disaster hits? All the focus was on rescue and relief. The new model, though, is proactive. It asks a totally different question. What can we do before it hits? So now, the focus is on reducing risk, getting communities prepared, and creating early warning systems to save lives before the storm even arrives. And if there was one single event that was the wake-up call, the moment that changed everything, it was the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. That was just devastating, and it exposed these massive gaps in the country's ability to respond. The very next year, India passed the Disaster Management Act, creating a national authority. A decade after that, they aligned their plans with global best practices like the Sendai framework. So this completely transforms disaster management. It's not a one-and-done event anymore. It's a continuous, never-ending cycle. You mitigate risks to lessen the blow. You prepare for what you can't stop. You respond effectively when it happens. And then, and this part is so critical, you recover in a way that makes you stronger for the next time. Because there is always, always, always a next time. Okay, so that's the big idea, the blueprint. But what does this proactive approach actually look like on the ground? Let's get into some real-world examples of this whole thing in action. A huge piece of the puzzle is all about construction. The National Building Code now actually requires disaster-resistant features in new buildings. The whole idea is to engineer cities that can absorb these shocks, not just crumble under them. That's great for new buildings, but you might be wondering, what about the millions of older ones? Well, that's where this key strategy called retrofitting comes in. It means going back into existing vulnerable structures in high-risk zones and strengthening them, giving them a fighting chance against a major earthquake. It's about preventing collapse and saving lives. And look, this isn't just about concrete and steel. A massive part of the strategy has to involve people. The focus is on training and awareness campaigns that empower local communities. Why? Because when a disaster actually hits, the true first responders are always your neighbors. Now, you hear all that, And it sounds like incredible progress. And it is. But the battle is absolutely not over. There are still some significant, deeply ingrained challenges on the horizon that are holding these efforts back.
The main obstacles are, they're kind of baked into the system. You've still got poor urban planning that puts new communities in high-risk areas. There's weak enforcement, which means even the best building codes get ignored. And then there's a persistent lack of public awareness, meaning a lot of people just don't know how to prepare or what to do when an alert comes.
And if you want to understand the real-world stakes here, just listen to this finding from India's National Disaster Management Authority. It's pretty chilling. In the capital, Delhi alone, an estimated 4,000 multi-story buildings would not survive a major earthquake. That's a stark reminder of the gap between the plan on paper and the reality on the ground. Which, of course, leaves us with this final critical question. India has made this monumental shift in how it thinks about disasters. But as climate change makes storms stronger, droughts longer, and heat waves more intense, the challenge isn't just about preparing for the predictable anymore. It's about how you prepare for the unimaginable.